Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and I'm going to take a look at a contemporary game. This was played in the last week, and white was Gennady Ginsburg, Grandmaster rated 2537, and black was Pavel Elyanov, one of the best players in the world, 2717 rated player. This was played in the Bundesliga, and the date was February 28 of 2010. Alright, well I don't want to say much about the opening. I'm basically going to go straight to the end game, which fortunately doesn't take very long at all in this game. Alright, so we have the four knights, and it's the Spanish four knights, and bishop to d6. And I like this setup. It's at least convenient, so you avoid a lot of the complications with knight to d4, and I think it's basically sound as well. So it looks stupid, but it defends the e-pawn, and if white plays bishop takes c6, then after d takes c6, the bishop looks normal all of a sudden. While if white doesn't take, as we'll see, black can very quickly reposition the bishop intelligently. So Ginsburg played a3, castles, d3, rook e8, castles, h6, h3, and bishop to f8. And it's just like a Ruy Lopez now. So rook e1, d6, and we've got a board full of pieces right now, but in just 9.5 moves, they'll almost all be gone. d4, takes, bishop d7, bishop f4, and now here comes the vacuum cleaner. Okay, we trade knights, we trade bishops, trade another minor piece, some major pieces, more major pieces, and lo and behold, everything is gone. Alright, so let's talk about this ending. Black, theoretically, you might think would have the slightly better chances because he has a bishop versus a knight, and the structure is otherwise pretty evenly balanced. So it's maybe a slight disadvantage for black that his pawn is stuck on e5. So, okay, that's a small drawback, but basically the bishop has free reign, and we would expect the bishop to be the slightly better piece in the long run. Black begins with the move b5. This looks very intelligent, so it keeps his pawns on the square opposite of the color of his bishop, so that way they work together very nicely rather than competing with each other. Okay, white played king to f1, bringing his king into play. Bishop to c5, developing the bishop, makes sense. King to e2, king f8, king to d3, king to e7. So both sides are simply taking care of king placement here. Okay, c4. And this makes sense. White is the weaker side in the position, at least theoretically. So swapping off pawns, all things being equal, should be slightly to his advantage. a6, c takes b5, a takes b5, knight e3. Notice that white doesn't rush to play f3 because when he plays f3, even though it's putting all the pawns on light squares, the problem is that it kind of opens this red carpet for the black king, or via f4, to jump into the heart of white's position. Plus, if white's king, let's say, goes back and plays passively, well then black can advance the queenside pawns too. Maybe play bishop to d4, c5, c4, and this can become, this is a sort of made for zugzwang situation for white. So white is not in any hurry to push that pawn. So knight to e3, g6, knight to g4, so a little trick, and black just ignores it with king to e6. The problem is on knight takes h6. Well, bishop f2, and this is certainly just a favorable trade for black. So f3, now threatening the pawn, so h5, and now the knight comes back. But again, king f6, and here comes the king, so ready to infiltrate and cause white all kinds of heartbreak. Okay, so white plays h4. Very logical move, keeping the king out. The problem, though, we'll see very shortly. Black plays king to g7. Maybe king to e6 is a little bit more accurate. Alright, so he plays king to g7, but it's going to come to the same thing. So white played knight to c2. Note, by the way, okay, I haven't discussed this, but black does not want to make this exchange because once he gets there, white has the possibility of creating an outside pass pawn, and that's much more likely to be a big problem for black than for white. So we don't recommend this. Okay, so after h4, king g7, knight c2, f5. b3 and king f6, a4 and king e6. Okay, well the last couple of moves are quite eventful. So by playing a4, white is going for the outside passer. The problem is that white has quite a few things he has to worry about. So now this h4 pawn is a problem. So the bishop can come to f2 or to e7, so just grab it. But of course the black king has to be close enough to the a pawn to stop it. So first order of business, bring the king to the queen side, and then white's pawn weaknesses will take care of themselves. Alright, so white played a5, black played f4. So a very good move, artificially isolating the h-pawn. It blocks up lines, but he realizes that he's now winning a pawn more or less by force here. So white played king to e2, king to d6, knight e1, bishop to b4, a6, king c7, knight to d3. So white's doing the very best he can defensively. So now he ties the bishop down to d6 and is hoping that he can just blockade in this position. So he plays b4, and at first glance it might seem like this should be enough to work. So king b6, king d2, king a6, and king c3. So how is black going to win this? Alright, that seems to be the question here. He can't play c5, king b6 and c5, because takes and then knight e5. And once that goes, this goes. And once that goes, both of these guys are weak as well. Likewise, black can't attack this guy yet because the e5 pawn hangs. So there's the solution. What black should do is not play c5 yet, but bring the king to e6, attack this pawn over here with the bishop, and that's going to really give white some serious problems. So very, very logical play by both sides. King to b6, king to c2, king c7, king d2, king d7, king e2, king e6, king f2, and now, okay, bishop to c7, and g3. So bishop to d8 was coming, so he defends it with his king, holding the c5 and e5 squares under observation with the knight. So white is doing everything he can to fight in this game, but we'll see that it's just not quite enough. Bishop checks, okay, king to g2, takes, and now bishop to e3. And black introduces a new idea. So now there's several points. Okay, so first of all, the bishop is no longer competing with the king, so he can play king to d6 and c5 without having to worry about surrendering the e-pawn. Additionally, the bishop on e3 prevents any monkey business by white on the king side with f4, so he's cut that out, and he might even be able to play bishop to d2 in some cases too. So this guy is just a powerhouse, and it might also support g5. So this bishop is doing just a fantastic job covering a lot of really important squares here. Okay, so white is running out of gas here. He plays king to h3, king d6, king g3, c5, takes, f4. So again, trying desperately to make a lot of exchanges at the last possible moment, but black disregards it with bishop to d4. So he's not going to help the knight get to the f4 square. So now, of course, if f e5, bishop e5 check, knight f4 makes no sense there. So he plays king f3, king e6, takes. And white would like to bring his king over to the queen side, but then he would lose the h-pawn. So his king has to stay in that neighborhood. And now black plays bishop to d6. So again, covering lots of important squares. So covering b4, covering c5, covering f4, and also it has the chance to come to e7. And it's also useful that it covers g3, so white's king can't go there right away. So king f3, bishop to e7, and in fact, white simply gave up here. So after bishop to e7, okay, king g3, he's just completely tied down, and okay, here b4 should be good enough. So there's not really anything that white can hope for in this position, so after bishop to e7, he gave up. Okay, now the presentation I gave you just now would seem to suggest that this was a very well played endgame by both sides, but black was just better. He started off with the better minor piece and went on to win with good technique. Alright, what I've actually given you is just a lot of baloney. So my challenge to you is to try to figure out what all of the nonsense was. So you might want to go through this or look up the game. Again, it's Ginsburg against Elyanov from the Bundesliga, played just a week or so ago. Well, as of this recording. It was played February 28, 2010. So that would be my suggestion. Now I'm going to go back through the game and point out some improvements for both sides. All right, so I would suggest not listening any further, so just mark where you are in the recording, analyze this on your own, and then come back, listen a second time, or just forward to this position on the recording, and at least see what I came up with. And you might find some improvements. So the following, I think, is not exhaustive, but will at least be illuminating. Okay, so here we go. Back to this position. All right, b5 may or may not be okay. Here, white has a very interesting and a little bit counterintuitive strategy, but I think it actually works quite well. So instead of king to f1, which isn't a mistake, he can play b4. So I want to just point this idea out first of all. So the idea is simply to fix the queen side in place and just prevent black from breaking through there, because if black can't break on the queen side, then white can simply keep his king on the king side and there's no danger there whatsoever. So let's see if black can break through on the queen side. Okay, first of all, the very direct a5 is a mistake. Excuse me, because b takes a5, bishop a3, a6, bishop c5, knight b to d2, or not knight b to d2, knight to b2. That's how unusual knight to b2 is, that I immediately try to convert it to knight b to d2. So knight to b2, the idea of knight to d3, hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn. Of course, the bishop can't defend the pawn on d6 because knight e5, bishop e5, and then a7. So black should play f6 here, knight to d3, bishop to b6, and now just knight to b4, knight c6, a7 next, white wins. So going back, after b4, a5 is no good. Alright, so let's try something more patient. Say bishop to e7 to clear a path for the king. So knight to b2. Okay, let's say c5, because otherwise knight to d3 is coming and might make c5 less attractive. So knight b2, c5, and now I think both knight to d3 and c3 are fine. So knight to d3, say takes, f6, king f1, king f7, king e2, king e6, c3, and the queen side is sealed. So what's black going to do? Okay, if he plays king to d7, maybe hoping to play king c7, king b6, a5, etc. Well, now white should arrange the pawns on the king side, so that way that side of the board is impermeable. So h4. And next he's going to play h5 if allowed, and then black might actually have some problems. So white might bring the knight to f5 and then try to show that he can make progress with his king. So g6, g4, h5, takes, and now f4. Alright, so black should probably play something like bishop to d6, but now after f5, there's no way for black to realistically reach the h4 pawn. I mean, white could play, if nothing else, knight e1, knight f3, bring the king to b3, and just call it a day. I mean, there's just absolutely nothing that black can do, period. So that would draw quite easily. Okay, back here, c3 is also fine too, instead of knight to d3. So for instance, takes, okay, a takes b4. If bishop to d8 to play a5, then c4 is equal, no problems there. Okay, if g6, king f1, f5, no threat, so there's no rush to play f3. So king e2, king f7, king d3, king e6, knight to d1, f4. But now this is quite different from what we had in the game. So here, this is fine, f3. Okay, let's say black plays king f6, trying to stir up some trouble. Well, no problem. c4, takes, king g5, knight to b4, king h4. Now first of all, white could just play king e2, king f1, and draw with no problem at all. But he can also play aggressively. Knight c4, takes, h4, whoops, sorry about that, h4, king f2, takes, e5, e6, e7, and this is just a draw. So white can't win. Black's pawns are dangerous enough to prevent the white knight from having time for knight c6, knight a7, and the pawns coming up. But certainly black isn't winning this. So this interesting plan of blocking the queenside, I think, is sufficient to draw right away. Okay, but king f1 is fine. Bishop c5, king e2, king f8. Okay, again, all these moves, white could play b4. He played king d3. Now, black might want to consider a5 to prevent this. But, okay, he played king d7. So c4, a6, cb5, ab5. Okay, that diagram is from earlier, or that coloring was from earlier. Knight e3, g6. Okay, now here white played knight to g4, which maybe doesn't ruin anything, but I don't really like this waste of tempi here. So let's maybe be a little bit more constructive. So king e2 right away, bishop d4, b3, h5, knight c2. Okay, so again, we can look at this position and wonder how exactly black is going to break through. All right, bishop to b6. Now we could just sit here, I think, but we can also make a little progress. a4, king d6, f3. Okay, so once we've played that, this is kind of the call for maybe the black king to try to come back to the king side. But now with so many exchanges, it's no big deal. So if king e6, for instance, we could consider ab, cb, knight a3, b4 is forced. And now, if nothing else, we want to just defend passively, we can with knight to c2. And what in the world is black ever going to do here? So bishop to c5, and we can just do anything. Okay, just g3 or h4 and g3, whatever. And there's just no way for black to win here. All right, so let's say ba, king c5, king d3. He's cut off. But he can try to use Zugzwang, bishop to a5. So now if the knight retreats, king to b4, and he takes the pawn. If the king retreats, the king comes to c4. So white has to move a pawn, but it turns out it's okay. One reason why it's okay is that black is in Zugzwang himself. So he's, as far as his king and bishop go. If he moves the bishop, then the white king can come to c3, problem solved. And if the king goes back, then white plays king to c4, and he's even better. All right, so f6, f4, g5, takes, g4, h4. Okay, so now all of white's pawns are safe. There's no way for black to penetrate on the king side with his king. But, okay, white has to figure out what to do about his queenside problems. Well, the answer is this. Knight e3, king to b4, knight c4, attacking the e5 pawn, bishop c7, a5, king to b5, and now knight to d2. So the idea is that if black takes the pawn, then knight f3, and white regains it and is absolutely fine here. So bishop to d8 is probably best. The idea of meeting knight f3 with bishop to f6, and then white is just losing a pawn. Might still just be drawing though. Maybe he just puts the king on c4 and sits, although I'm not sure about that. Maybe the black king can come around the back rank and go up and over. So best is just knight to c4 here, reestablishing the defense of the a5 pawn and attacking the e5 pawn. So black has nothing better than bishop c7, and this is just a draw. Okay, so back to the game. Instead of king e2, our improvement, white played knight to g4, king e6, f3, h5, knight e6, king f6. So as we've already discussed, the threats for the king to come wiggling his way in, and in the game, to stop that, white played h4, which is a mistake. Okay, let's get rid of that. What he should have done, I think, is knight to c2, simply allowing it. King g5, b3, king f4, king e2. And, okay, he can play king g3 and then f5, trying to break up the structure here. But this actually is not such a big deal. So takes, a4, all right, let's say bishop to a6, knight a3, bishop c5, knight c2. Okay, so we see that black's making no progress that way. So takes, and now let's say e4. Well, against this, takes, a5, king e2, so we keep our king active. And in this position, white is absolutely fine. So there's no trouble at all. Of course, black can't take the knight because the pawn will promote. What does black do? If he plays king to d6, then knight f5 check, and we pick this off. Black has no winning chances here, only losing chances. But, you know, what can he do if he doesn't if he can't take, and he can't play king to d6 to try to stop the a-pawn with his king, then what is he going to do here? I mean, it's just not evident. I mean, he could try maybe something really slow like king e6, then bishop to b6, and then hopefully king d7 and bishop to d8. Maybe. But, even in that case, White's king comes up, and he plays king e2, king e3 to e4, and he's better. Alright, so no success to be had there for black. So I think knight c2 and b3, and then the king coming back to the king side to defend against black's king incursion should be absolutely satisfactory. So h4 is an inaccuracy. Okay, I already pointed out that king e6 would have been better than this. And here I think a waiting move like king e2 would have been fine. Alright, and here I said king e6 is of course a good move. We're bringing the king back to the queen side so we can attack the h-pawn. But in fact he should have played f4, and then this would have been like the game. Alright, instead he played king to e6, and this is a mistake because here White should have played not a5 immediately. That was a blunder. After a5, f4, okay, then black has made some progress. But instead, after e takes f5 first, and only now a5, now black can't make this nice, tidy ceiling move with f4, after which it's just all on one side. This position might actually be good for White. King d5, for instance, a6, e4 check, takes, king e2. And what's black going to do? I mean, he's not going to make any progress with the e-pawn. White has a kingside majority, which could become useful. And, well, this a-pawn is great. So king e5, okay, g3. So we don't let him come in. Say bishop to a7, knight e3. So no king f5, king g4 stuff. c5, g4. So make a second passed pawn. Takes. And now h5, g3, h6, king f6, h7. And now we take. Well, we check. We take. Knight f5. And now we go for the queen side. And a very interesting position here. So you might think that White should play the obvious move, king to d3. But that would be a big mistake. So the best move is king to d2 or king to e3. And we'll see why in a minute. King c7, king to d3, king b7, knight to b5, king c6, king c4. And it's mutual Zugzwang, and since it's black's move, he loses. But if it were White to move here, it would only be a draw. So knight to a7 check, king b7, king takes c5, king takes a7, king takes b4, king to b6. Black gets the opposition, draws the game. Now, if White had played king to d3 in that earlier position instead of king to e3 and then d3, it would be White's move here, and it would be a draw. Okay, the point of all of this is that with e takes f5 from here, the position stays very, very imbalanced, but the knight has real jobs, has a real job to do, and White is, I think, even better here. So king e6 was a mistake. a5 was an even bigger mistake, maybe. Okay, and now f4. Alright, well here White played king to e2, which was also a mistake. He should have played b4. Okay, of course the bishop can't go to e7, which is where he wants to go because of a6. So that's one of the main points. We're trying to tie this bishop down so he doesn't have time for this plan of winning the h-pawn. So b4, bishop a7 is essentially forced. I mean, he can go elsewhere on the diagonal, but if he goes to f2, king e2, and he can't take the h-pawn because White's a-pawn will queen. Alright, so here, king e2, cutting off the f2 square, king d6, knight to d1, say king to c7, knight to d3, hitting the e-pawn, bishop to d4, and now White just draws by twiddling his thumbs. So there's just no danger at all. He just moves his king in little circles in the center of the board, and Black has absolutely nothing. He can't attack the f-pawn, the h-pawn from f2, because of course it'll just be captured. And the big problem is that, okay, if he moves the bishop somewhere, somehow, to attack the pawn on h4, he'll have lost the e5 pawn several moves before that happens. He can play king to d6 to defend the pawn, but if he does that, and he brings the the bishop around, then the a pawn goes. So black can't hold everything. So this is just a dead draw. White draws in his sleep here. So king to e2 is another mistake, and then king to d6 is still another mistake because he's blocking the bishop's path to e7. So he should have gone to d7 instead. Okay, so king to d6, knight e1, bishop b4, a6, king c7, knight d3, bishop d6, and here white played b4, which is, I think, the last chance for him to have equality. So here with g3, I think he might still be able to save this game. Okay, so black should take, and now f4. So anything for activity here. ef, e5, bishop e7, knight f4, bishop h4. Now we'd like to play knight takes g6, but that would be a blunder because g2 and the white king is cut off along this diagonal. So king f3, or sorry, e6 first, c5, now king f3, and white is actually holding this. King to b6, knight takes, bishop g5, e7, takes is forced, and white holds no problem. Okay, so there still was a draw to be had in this ending, even after all of these mutual inaccuracies, especially from white. So instead he played b4, and now he just is losing. So the rest of the game, I more or less gave you the truth of the matter. Black just is winning here, just one step at a time. So first we protect the e-pawn, and then we bother the g-pawn. White could have tried g4 instead of g3. I'm not sure it makes any difference, so it'll be very similar. So fg, bishop g3. Okay, we put the bishop on the best square here. We're going to go to d4 if he does nothing, or just play c5. Yeah, just king d6 and c5 is the main plan. So that's what happens if white just kind of temporizes on the king side. And if white plays f4, okay, then takes. Well, okay, if knight g6, king e4 is an easy win. Okay, notice that white can't play knight f4 because of bishop c7, so the h-pawn's not in any danger. So king f3, king f6, knight to d3. Now we remaneuver the bishop, and now g5 should be winning. Alright, so this I think would have been a little bit better try for white, but ultimately I think it's a loss for him. But the game's choice, g3 instead, it turned out to be pretty easy, as we saw. The bishop was very good on e3, and after king h3, king d6, followed by c5, it was pretty routine. Okay, and we already saw this. Alright, so that, I hope, gives you a fuller picture of what was going on in the game. I don't want to claim that this is everything, that this is the full and complete and perfect analysis, but it does show that white had many more chances than a quick play through the game might suggest. So, yes, in some respects the bishop was the better minor piece, but because the pawn was on e5, that gave white a lot of good block-hitting chances. I mean, white had pretty good control over the light squares in many of those variations, and more active play in a variety of ways would have saved the day, and maybe even at a couple of points given white a serious advantage. So it shows that the game unfortunately didn't have the kind of beautiful textbook character to it that's always a lot of fun, where you just see the one player making all the perfect moves, and the other side just applauds at how wonderful a presentation it was. So this was a real game, and it just turned out that white made more mistakes than black did. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that and learned something from it too, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.